Have you ever sat in that heavy silence at a family dinner? Here on Human Stories, we retell those moments, honest, everyday, sometimes controversial. Every story is a mirror. Subscribe, join the conversation, and maybe find a little healing. The garage at Seattle-Tacoma throbbed with a low, endless hum. Yellow light pooled under sodium lamps, the kind that makes everything look jaundiced. My breath fogged in front of my face. I tightened my denim jacket and kept a hand on Jonah's small shoulder as we walked toward the car. He held his dinosaur backpack in front of him like a shield. He had not said a word since the gate. Vanessa had hugged him with one arm and checked her watch with the other. She had kissed my cheek without looking me in the eye. The orange tag on her carry-on flashed like a tiny alarm as the escalator carried her away. I clicked the key fob. Our old sedan blinked twice. Somewhere above us, a suitcase clattered across concrete, then silence. "Big day tomorrow," I said. "We can stop for pie on the way home." Jonah stopped. His fingers clamped around my wrist, sudden and hard nails pressing into skin. His eyes were dark and hot in his pale face. "Grandma," he said, barely a sound, "do not go back to the house?" Everything in me paused. The air changed. Behind us, a fan kicked on and pushed the cold across my ankles. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" He swallowed. The tip of his tongue touched his front tooth. His voice stayed thin, almost not there. "She was on the phone this morning, in the office. She said it would look like an accident, the gas at night, no mistakes." The hum of the garage seemed to lift and then drop like water in my ear. I watched my breath leave my body in a white ribbon. My fingers remembered brass, pins and tumblers, a shop that smelled like oil and key shavings. The day my father set a practice lock in my palm and told me to listen. "Tell me all of it," I said. "She said there is money when you are gone." He blinked. "She said someone would take care of it. A man. M. Stone." The name landed like a coin in a jar, clear, cold. I looked at the black shape of our car and at my grandson's small face. He had kept too many things quiet since the accident on Aurora took his father. He lay still at sunrise and listened. He watched without blinking. He did not invent monsters. "Okay," I said. The word left a taste like metal. "We are not going home." The relief that moved through him was fast and real. His grip loosened. He let the backpack slip to one shoulder. He exhaled a quick white puff. It vanished. I unlocked the car. The dome light glowed a tired yellow. I buckled him in and tucked the buckle guard flat under his coat. My hands shook enough to make the key miss the ignition once then catch. The phone buzzed in my pocket as I backed out. Vanessa's name floated up the screen as if it had been waiting there all along. I answered. "Hello. Where are you?" Her voice was even pleasant. "You should be home by now." My scalp prickled. "Traffic on I-5, I said. We stopped for dinner." "At this hour? Not a question. Where?" "That place by the shopping plaza," I said. I kept my voice light. Windows down and oldies on the radio light. "You know the one." A breath on the other end. My flight was rescheduled. Early morning, not tonight. "You checked the gate board," I said. "You always check the gate board." "Things change." The line turned soft. "Enjoy your dinner, Mom. Kiss Jonah." The call ended. I dropped the phone into the cup holder without looking at it. In the rear view, he held my eyes deep and direct. "She knows," he said, "about us not being home." I thought of the thermostat in the hallway, the slick white face of it, the tiny camera the salesman said would help with energy use. I thought of red lights hidden under glass. Vanessa had insisted. Remote control, she said. Convenience, she said. In the evenings, I had heard a faint whir and a click, the sound of something turning his head. "Seatbelt okay," I said. "Are you warm enough?" He nodded. He pushed his palms under his thighs the way he always did when he needed to make himself small. We left the levels of concrete and yellow light and climbed the spiral into the night. The windshield fogged from the heat of us. I wiped a circle with the sleeve of my coat and aimed the car for the southbound lanes. Rain stitched itself across the glass. Wipers went and came. The green signs floated past. Tukwila, then Federal Way. A semi-trailer passed us like a moving building. Its taillights were two red points that dragged a long line behind them. I drove with both hands. I kept the speed steady. I did not look at the clock. I could feel the phone by my knee, a small square of pressure. I could feel the shape of my house like a map in my body. The creak behind the fence. The third stair from the bottom that creaked unless you stepped on the far right. The thermostat's red dot. In the passenger mirror, a dark car eased into view and held there. It stayed for 3 exits, then peeled away. My shoulders relaxed half an inch. "Do you want music?" I said. "No," he said. We passed a gas station with a bright red logo. I switched off the headlights and coasted in. I paid with cash and watched my reflection rock in the pump's scratch display. Jonah watched me through the window. He put his palm on the glass. White fog bloomed under it, then cleared when he lifted his hand. "Bathroom," he said when I got back in. Inside, I said, "Together." The clerk had a stitched patch with a first name and a picture of a dog on his lanyard. A TV hung near the ceiling showed a cooking show with the sound off. Everything smelled like burnt coffee. I bought 2 bottles of water and a candy bar we did not need. Outside, the rain had thinned to a fine mist. Back on the highway, the world felt wider, emptier. The road unrolled and unrolled. Jonah leaned his head against the seat. The light from the dash turned his skin blue. His eyes stayed open. He did not ask why we were driving to Tacoma. He did not ask who Earl was. He had met him once before the move to Ballard. He remembered the picture of the ferry on Earl's wall and the bowl of wrapped peppermints by the door. A train sounded somewhere. The horn went long and low and made something in my chest ache. When the city fell behind us, the lights thinned. Tall black trees lined the shoulder like guards. The heater breathed steady. I cracked the window and tasted wet bark and metal. Rain tapped the edge of the glass. I thought of Vanessa at 7, a sweater with a crooked unicorn on the front. She would stand on a stool and blow her breath against the window and draw a cat's face in the fog. She would press her thumb on the center like a nose. I could feel the cold of that window on my cheek as if I were the one leaning on it. I pressed my tongue against the back of my teeth until my jaw hurt. I kept my eyes on the white lines. They went and went. Jonah fell asleep 2 minutes before we took the exit. His mouth opened just enough to show the tiny chip on his front tooth. He had gotten it on the playground and never told anyone because he did not want me to worry. He kept secrets like coins. I took the second right, then a left, past a mural of a salmon on a brick wall. The street lamps here were soft and orange. They made the wet pavement look like the inside of a shell. Earl's building sat low and square near the tracks. A single light burned in the lobby. I pulled to the curb and turned the car off. The sudden quiet pressed in. Jonah stirred, blinked, sat up. "Where are we?" he said. "South Tacoma," I said. "Earl's place." He nodded. He did not ask anything else. We climbed the short steps to the glass door. A paper flyer about a lost cat curled under a strip of tape. The cat in the picture had one ear folded down. I could feel the heartbeat in my throat. Inside the lobby, a small TV glowed in the guard booth. A fan turned lazily beside it. Earl was bent over a magazine. I tapped the glass with my knuckle. He looked up. Confusion moved across his face, then recognition, then a different thing, older and heavier. He stood and came to the door. His keys rang like bells. Behind me, Jonah's breath misted the glass. He traced a small shape in it with one finger. A key. He wiped it away when Earl opened the door. "Ruth," Earl said, "it is late." "It is," I said. "Can we come in?" He stepped aside and held the door. The warmth of the lobby moved over us. The fan clicked once and kept turning. Jonah looked up at me. His hand found mine. Our palms were cold and damp, pressed together. We crossed the threshold. Earl held the door and the lobby wrapped around us. The heat was dry and smelled like old carpet. A fan ticked. The plastic fern in the corner leaned as if it had been leaning for years. He locked the door and looked at Jonah, then at me. His eyes were tired in a familiar way, a night shift way. "You were not on my list," he said. "I know," I said. "We need a place for a few hours." He studied my face, then nodded toward the booth. "I can make coffee. I cannot promise it is good." "Hot is enough." We followed him through a narrow gate into the booth. A small TV glowed with a late movie. A cowboy rode across a river without making a splash. Earl filled a chipped mug from a machine that groaned and spat. He set out a second mug and a paper cup with a lid for Jonah. Steam rose in thin lines. Jonah held the cup in both hands and did not drink. Earl leaned on the counter. He had a ring of keys clipped to his belt. They hung heavy and bright. "You look like someone standing on a rug that is about to be pulled." Something like that. His gaze moved to Jonah again. He lowered his voice. "You tell me what you need. If I can do it, I will do it." "I need a phone," I said, "not mine." He dug in a drawer and brought out a phone with a cracked corner. The back was held on with tape. "I keep it in case the landline dies," he said. "No name on it. Credit is on it. Camera still works." "Thank you." He set it in my palm. It felt warm from the drawer. I turned it on and waited for the home screen to wake up. A picture of a ferry slid across water and then sank into icons. "We should have a signal," I said. "If I call once and hang up, we are all right. If I call twice, there is a problem." Earl looked at Jonah. "Can you remember that kid?" Jonah nodded. His fingers left a damp print on the paper lid. "Where are we going?" Earl said. I met his eyes. He read the answer before I said it. He shook his head once, not to deny me, more to show that he understood how bad this was. "You sit and I will find you a blanket," he said to Jonah. "There is a couch in the back. It is clean." He looked at me again. "You are not going alone." "I'm not taking him," I said. "You are not going alone." His voice was not loud. He lifted his keys and let them fall. The sound was soft and final. I could see the chain of choices laid out like white lines on a road. Jonah watched my face. I touched his hair. "You stay with Earl," I said. "Lock the door. Do not answer for anyone who is not us." Jonah's throat moved. "How long?" "Not long." I kept my voice even. "I will call." He slid off the stool and went into the back room. The couch was a neat rectangle covered with a wool blanket. A framed picture of a black and white fairy hung above it. He lay down and pulled the blanket to his chin. His eyes stayed on me from the edge of the room. Earl took a jacket from a hook. He lifted a flashlight and a roll of gauze from a drawer and put them in his pocket. He nodded toward the door. The night hit my face like a cold cloth. The rain had thinned to a mist. We crossed to the car. The glass was filmed with damp. I breathed on the window and drew a circle with my sleeve and then wiped it clean. We got in and I started the engine. The route back to Ballard was a river of empty lanes. The city lay quiet and wet. Buildings held their light in their windows. When we passed the stadiums, their steel fingers reached into the dark sky. Earl watched the mirror and said nothing. I kept my grip light on the wheel so my hands would not shake. We turned off the highway near the ship canal. The houses were low and close. The rhododendrons were heavy with water. I killed the headlights a block early. We rolled to a stop at the corner of the alley behind my street. Earl cut his engine. He leaned forward and peered down the block. A single porch light glowed 2 houses over. Our house sat dark and flat. The maple in the front yard made a darker shape in the dark. "I will wait here," he said. 20 minutes, then I call." I put the burner in my pocket. I pressed my palm to his shoulder once, brief and steady, and opened my door. The back gate stuck the way it always did. I lifted it with my hip, and it cleared the latch without a sound. The yard smelled like wet dirt. The deck boards were slick. I stepped where I knew the wood was not warped. My breath came out and turned to a faint cloud that clung to the edge of my scarf. At the kitchen door, the keypad blinked. The tiny red light sat steady above the numbers. I used my key and slipped inside. Cold met me a sheet of it hanging in the dark. The refrigerator hummed. The clock over the sink ticked in a small, patient way. I stopped and let the house talk to me. The air smelled clean at first, then there it was a sweetness that did not belong. Not cookies, not fruit, a chemical edge that sat on the back of the tongue. I moved the way I had moved 1,000 nights. Right foot on the far edge of the 3rd stair. Hand to the banister only where the varnish had not worn through. I went up and paused at the landing. The thermostat sat on the wall and looked at me with its round black eye. A red pixel glowed deep inside it. I lifted a dish towel from the linen closet and hung it over the face. The red light still bled around the edge. I pressed the towel flatter and it went dark. The office door at the end of the hall was locked. Vanessa had installed a new handle with a keyhole shaped like a small mouth. I took the leather roll from inside my coat. It cracked when I unrolled it. The picks lay in a neat line. My father's initials were scratched into the back of the tension bar. I slid the tool into the keyway and felt for the stacks. My ear knew the sound. The metal sang, then softened, then gave. The knob turned. Inside the room was arranged with a care that made my teeth ache. Books stood straight. A pencil lay at a right angle to a pad. The screen of the laptop reflected the window. Nothing moved. I closed the door and set my flashlight on its base, so it faced the ceiling and made a pool of low light. The desk told the truth. It always did. I went through the top drawers first. Pens, envelopes, a box of paper clips, nothing that mattered. The second drawer held old passports in a neat stack. The third drawer stuck halfway. I eased it open and found binder tabs in green and blue and under them red. The red folder was thin and hard. I slid it out. My mouth felt dry as if I had eaten chalk. I opened the front cover and saw numbers, bank statements with a name I did not know, transfers to M. Stone. The dates matched the way Vanessa's voice had changed the hardened part of it, the part she hid in the other room when she thought I was asleep. There was a photocopy of the policy my husband had set up in the year before his heart gave out. The headings were blurred from the copier. In the margin in Vanessa's slanted hand, someone had written in red beneficiary, then a line to my name, and below that, a box around trust. Next to it, 21 underlined twice. A note on a sticky tab read, "When this unlocks." I did not hear myself breathe. The light made a thin sound against the ceiling. I lifted the burner and took pictures one by one. The shutter chirped politely. I put the folder back exactly where it had been with the green tab on top and the blue peeking out. I stood and turned off the flashlight. The dark closed in. I moved to the window and pressed a finger to the glass. It was cold. My breath touched it and left a soft circle that faded. The sound of the front door downstairs came up the air like a drop in a well. Metal on metal, a pause. Then the slow weight of it closing. I took the burner out and made one call. One ring for all right, two for trouble. I let it ring twice and killed the line. The house went very quiet again, which meant anything could be happening. I set the phone on the desk with the screen down and slid behind the office door. The wall was cool through my coat. Footsteps made their way across the floor below. A voice came up, a woman's voice. "Vanessa." The words were clear and flat. "Check the upstairs." Another voice answered, a deeper shape to it, no edges on the vowels, on it. I pressed my spine against the plaster. The smell in the air seemed stronger here, like a syrup you could not swallow. A stripe of light under the door made a small bar across the floor. It trembled when someone walked in the hallway. A shadow fell across the gap and stayed there. Breathing gathered on the other side. Not Vanessa, taller. The door handle moved a fraction and stopped. "Is it clear she called from the bottom of the stairs?" "Just checking," the man said. The knob turned. The latch began to rise. The door started to open. The strip of light widened. A sliver of the hallway came into view. A hand came with it, big and scarred fingers closing on the edge of the door. I held my breath and felt the blood move in my ears. The office door opened another inch. The dark inside the room held still. The hand tightened on the wood. The hinge whispered. The hinge whispered, and then stopped. The hand on the door tightened, then loosened, as if the person on the other side was listening for my breath. "Kitchen is clear," Vanessa called from below. The words came up the stairwell like cold air. The hand let go. The door drifted back a hair. I moved. 2 slow steps to the window. My fingers found the latch without looking. The paint stuck to my skin. I lifted careful until the lower sash gave and slid. Night pushed its face inside. The yard smelled of wet cedar and soil. Footsteps on the stairs, one set, heavy, deliberate. They paused at the top, then turned toward the hall that led to my room. I eased a knee onto the sill. My breath fogged the glass at the edge of my face. I swung one leg out and found the lip of the trim with my shoe. The clapboard was slick. The ivy trellis near the corner rustled in the mist wind. Below, a sound. Metal on metal at the back door, then the dull thud of a shoulder. Earl. He had heard the 2 rings. He was inside the kitchen. For a second, a new scent moved through the air and made the sweet edge sharper. The man at the top of the stairs turned fast. "Someone at the back," he said. His voice was low and close. He was 2 rooms away from me. "I have it." "Leave him," Vanessa said. "Upstairs first." The man ignored her. His steps went down hard and quick, and then another sound came up, a scuffle, the scrape of shoes, a breath forced out. A muffled cry that carried my name. I closed my eyes. I pulled my other leg through the window and flattened myself against the wall. The ledge felt an inch wide. The wood had a cold skin. The trellis was 2 feet to my left. My fingers searched for knots in the boards and found only wet paint. The office door opened behind me into emptiness. Air moved through the room. I did not turn. I kept my body pressed to the house and slid my weight slow toward the corner. The trellis reached my hands. The slats flexed under my grip. They held. I breathed through my mouth so the fog would not give me away. I lowered my weight and my bad hip sparked like a struck match. I let it burn and kept moving rung to rung leaves, brushing my face and leaving a green stain of smell. Another crash inside, a voice snarled. A chair fell. The chemical sweetness curled in my throat and made me want to cough. The moment I touched the wet grass, the yard tilted. My knee took the shock and my hip shouted again. I crouched in the dark between the laurel and the rain barrel and waited for the pulse to settle back into my wrists. Found him, the man called from the kitchen, old, stupid. "Where is she?" Vanessa said. "Closer." Her foot hit the bottom stair. "Is she upstairs?" "No sign," he said, "but she's not far. The back door is open." I slid along the fence, keeping low. The maple flicked water on my hair. I lifted the gate again to clear the catch. The alley was a strip of wet, shining black. A raccoon froze under the neighbor's truck and then vanished into the dark. At the corner, I ran as much as my hip allowed to the car. I flung the door open, dropped into the seat, and dug for the burner. It lit my palm with a pale square. I called 911 and said my name. The words lined up without effort. Address. Forced entry. Evidence. A child in danger. The operator's voice stayed steady and human. A patrol car rolled by at the far end of the block like a ghost. I flagged it down with both hands. The officer inside looked at me and then at Earl's ID on the chain that hung from his belt. He keyed his mic. Another car slid in behind the first. Lights, but no siren. Blue and red washed over the rain. "Stay in the car," one officer said. "Keep your head down." They moved like water around the edges of the yard. A shout, the fracture of glass, then a bark of an order and the heavy slam of a body into wood. It took less than a minute, and all of it lasted forever. When they brought Earl out, he was blinking like he had been dropped into sunlight. A cut traced his hairline and dripped onto his collar. He put a hand on the car to steady himself. He looked at me and his mouth tried on a smile and then could not keep it. "I am all right," he said. The words were there, but his voice had gravel in it. "Sit down. You sit down." They brought the man next. His wrists were cuffed low. Tattoos crawled up his forearms and disappeared under the sleeve of a canvas jacket. His eyes were the dull color of parking lot water. One officer said his name into his shoulder mic. "Mason Stone." Subject 2 fled out the back, another officer said. He was breathing hard but not out of breath. "Female, dark hair, black jacket. We have units canvassing." The chemical smell leaked out the back door and breathed into the alley. An officer pulled on gloves and went inside with a small flashlight and a little box that chirped. He came out a minute later with his mouth a hard line. I showed the pictures on the burner to the older officer. He looked and looked again. He did not say what he was thinking. He nodded once. "We are taking him," he said. He glanced at Earl's head. "We will have a paramedic look at you. Then we will get you both back." I wanted to ask if they had gone upstairs, if the towel still covered the thermostat's eye, if the red folder lay undisturbed. I swallowed the questions. The only thing that mattered had not been in that house for hours. The ride to South Tacoma had the shape of an ending and did not feel like one. Rain stitched itself across the windows. Earl held gauze to his forehead. He smelled like old wool and iron. His hand shook once and then stopped. He kept one palm flat on his knee like a man holding a bird under it. When we pulled up at the building, the lobby light burned exactly the way it had burned when we left. The lost cat flyer still curled under the tape. The fan still ticked. The guard booth sat small and bright in the big quiet. The service door that led to the back room was open a few inches. A smear of moisture ran down the glass near the handle as if a small hand had rested there. The hairs on my arms lifted. "Wait," the officer said. He went ahead and pressed the door with his shoe. It swung wide and hit the wall with a soft sound. "Jonah," I called. My voice sounded normal and did not feel normal. "Jonah, it is Grandma." Silence breathed in the room. The couch was not neat now. The wool blanket slid half off and made a dark hill on the floor. A paper cup lay on its side on the low table. A patch of condensation had printed a circle onto a folded scrap of paper under the glass. The officer tried the inner door. Locked. He stepped back and hit it with his shoulder. Wood split with a tired crack. He went in first with his flashlight. I followed and felt the room all at once. The heat. The imprint in the couch cushion where a small body had been. The bowl of peppermints missing 3 pieces. I picked up the paper from under the cup. Water had bloomed the ink at the edge and lifted a few letters into small flowers. The rest was clear and round and not Jonah's usual careful hand. It looked like someone writing fast with a hand that did not want to shake. "Mom found me. She says you are making things up. She says I have to go with her. I am scared. Grandma, help." Wind moved somewhere in the vents and made a soft, hollow sound. I could feel the place on the glass door where his palm had been still cool in the air. Earl's breath roughened in his chest. The officer was already on his radio. He asked for a description packet and road alerts, and said words in a sequence he had learned for thefts and runaways and worse. I folded the note and put it inside my coat along with the phone. I closed my hand over both. The paper warmed against my ribs, the plastic pressed into my palm. The scent of coffee that had burned too long sat in the air above us and would not go away. The lobby light hummed, the fan turned. The picture of the fairy on the wall watched us cross back into the hall. The glass door held our reflections as shadows and then let us through. The station smelled like paper and rain tracked in on shoes. Fluorescent lights hummed over a room divided by glass. A coffee pot kept the burn going just to prove it could. Earl sat with gauze taped to his head and his jacket folded over his knees. He watched the door and said nothing. I put the burner on the table and scrolled through the photos. The officer with the lined face looked twice at each one. He did not ask what was obvious. He wrote a note, then another. When he spoke, he did not raise his voice. "We have a man in custody from your address," he said. "He is talking. He used the name Mason Stone. He confirms a planned incident at your house. He describes a leak. He describes timing while occupants sleep. The fluorescent lights made everything look too clean." I held the edge of the table to feel wood under my palm. Earl watched my hands. "What about the boy?" Earl said. He kept his words level and swallowed between them. "We are broadcasting a description," the officer said. "Vehicles, routes, terminals. We have patrols checking arterial roads out of the city." I said Jonah's name into the room to keep it from leaving my mouth any other way. It settled and stayed. I thought of the towel over the thermostat's eye and the red dot disappearing. I thought of the smell that had haloed the kitchen. I thought of the clean note in my pocket, its letters distorted by water. Someone brought the phone Vanessa had called earlier. It sat on the table in a small plastic bag like an exhibit. The officer's radio hissed and clicked. Somewhere a printer fed out paper and then stopped. Earl cleared his throat. "There is a kid at that age," he said. "They learn things by lying still. They learn to listen." "He listened," I said. "He did." The officer's hand drifted to a map on the wall. His finger tapped the green line that cut across the top third of the state. He spoke to another officer about trails and mile markers and cabins that get rented with cash. Their voices rose and fell. My name came out of the intercom and then Jonah's. The room had corners that felt too far away. The phone in my pocket vibrated. Unknown number. The sound was small and private like a breath under a blanket. I put the burner on the table and answered my own with my head bent and my mouth close to the receiver. Grandma Jonah said so quiet that the word was a shape more than a sound. "Where are you?" I said. "Are you hurt?" "I am not hurt," he said. "I took her phone when she slept. I hid in the bathroom." The window is small. "Tell me what you see." "A lake," he said. He took a small breath and it moved through the phone like silk. "Trees. A fence. A barn with wood that looks gray. There is a mailbox at the road. It says Cedar Hollow Ranch. There is a number, 8 and 7. Mile 87, I said. He did not answer. I could hear the steady hush of a sleeping house. A spring in the floor somewhere clicked and unclicked with breathing. "Listen to me," I said. "Find a place to hide that is not obvious. Stay low. Stay quiet. Put the phone where she will not see it. We are coming." He took one more breath. "Okay." The line went dark. I lifted my head. The room was the same room and not the same. The officer had already signaled to someone at the radio. Another hand marked a point on the map with a bright cap. "WA 20, he said. "Skagit County. We have ranches out there with names like that. Mile marker 87 puts us in the valley before the pass." He turned back to me. "You ride with us. You do not get out of the car until I say. Understood." Earl stood up. He steadied himself with a hand on the chair. "I am coming," he said. The officer looked at the strip of gauze on his forehead and at the way he kept his feet planted as if the floor might shift. "You sit in the second car," he said. "You stay back." We drew coats around ourselves and followed the officer through a hall that smelled like wet wool. Outside, dawn had not opened yet. The rain had thinned to a smear. Blue lights turned the pavement into a moving river. I climbed into the back seat and folded my hands and let the car hold their weight. The city slid away in a series of reflections. Storefronts leaning streetlights doubling themselves in wet glass. Then the road went long and black and the edges of the world took on shapes made only by trees. On the right, water lay flat in the low fields. The sky began to admit a pale seam. I watched my breath cloud and clear on the window when the defroster lagged. I pressed a finger into the fog and drew a tiny circle and let it disappear again. The ring of the keys on the officer's belt chimed when the car took a bump. I counted the sound and felt steadier. The turnoff came with no drama. A wooden sign leaned from a post with its paint peeling in red flakes. The letters said Cedar Hollow in a hand that had tried to be careful and had not quite succeeded. The mile marker stood where Jonah said it would stand, small and green and blunt as a fact. We stopped before the bend where the track dropped toward the house. "Wait here," the officer said. The word wait wrapped around the inside of the car like plastic. He and the others slid out and into the trees one by one and took the quiet with them. The engines went still. Only the rain talked a small regular sound on needles and on the backs of my hands. I tried to sit. I counted to 30, then 60, then lost count and started again. Earl was in the second car behind us. He sat up straight and kept his head turned, listening. The rise of the land made a crease where the house could hide. A bird called from the far end of the clearing with a voice like a metal whistle. A single shout, then another. The sound moved and met itself under the branches. Something struck wood hard. A dog barked once and then was silent. I opened the door and put my feet on the ground as gently as if the earth might complain, and I walked toward the bend. The house came into view slow as a photograph developing. 2 stories of unpainted boards and a porch around the front. The barn stood swayed off its center behind it. The lake on the left lay flat and held the first light like a coin laid in a palm. Officers positioned themselves behind trunks behind the corner of the barn, behind the rusted bed of a truck that had no tires. On the porch, Vanessa. Her hair stuck to her face. She held Jonah in the crook of her left arm and a pistol in her right. The muzzle made a black period in the air. Jonah's feet were on the boards. He was not trying to get free. He had made himself quiet and small the way a boy at that age does when he has learned where adults put their eyes. The officer in front raised a hand palm out. "Mrs. Keene," he said, "put the weapon down." She held Jonah tighter. Her jaw worked as if she were chewing on a stone. "You have no right to be here." "You are holding a child with a gun in your hand," he said. He did not say the rest. I kept to the edge of the road and moved until the porch was clear of the hedge. I did not get close enough to change anything. I made sure she could see me. "Vanessa," I said. Her head snapped. She took me in with one fast look. A dozen things passed behind her eyes. One of them I knew, which made it worse. "Look at what you made," she said. The words came out raw. I did not answer that. I kept my eyes on Jonah. He did not cry. His breath came in small, regular pulls. I could feel the shape of those breaths inside my own chest. "Let him walk down the steps," I said. "He will go to the officer and sit. The rest is you and me." She laughed once. The sound was not laughter. You always say it like it is simple. Nothing in her grip softened. The gun trembled without moving. "Vanessa," I said again. I said her name the way I said it when she came in from the rain with her shoes full of mud and the school note lost. I made a place for it in my mouth and put it down there and did not move it. Jonah's eyes flicked sideways and landed for a breath on the barn. He did it again. The officer near the barn took half a step and then stopped. The dog somewhere unseen let out a small sound and swallowed it. "Mrs. Keene, we can all walk away from this," the officer said. He kept his voice low and even. "Put the weapon down." She spoke to me, not to him. "That policy was not for you." "I am not going to talk about paper on a porch with a gun," I said. Her mouth thinned. For 1 second, her fingers loosened around Jonah's shoulder. In that second, he turned his head and bit down on the crook of her arm. The motion was not wild. It was measured. His shoulder dropped and his knees bent the way a coach teaches a child to fall. He rolled toward the rail and away from the muzzle and toward the air. The shot cracked across the clearing and flew out over the lake and hit nothing we could see. The boards of the porch took the recoil and gave it back as a shudder. A bird lifted in a black burst from the top of the barn and ran words across the sky that no one could hear. Officers moved the way water moves when someone steps into it. 2 of them were on the porch before the echo died. One hand on the wrist with the gun, one hand on the shoulder. Vanessa folded and fought without finding a shape to fit inside. The pistol clattered and slid against the step and pinwheeled down and came to rest in a crack between boards. Jonah ended up under the rail with his hands over his head. I walked, then ran, then walked again when my hip balked. I was at the steps and up them with someone's shout behind me that said, "Wait," and someone else's that said, "Stop her." And neither word did what it was meant to do. He was trembling but solid. His hair smelled like wet wood. His breath hit my throat and went through it. I put my hands on his shoulders and felt the heat of him and the small damp at his collar. "I am here," I said. He nodded against my coat and then pulled back to look at my face as if he needed to make sure the bones were in the right places. They brought Vanessa past us with her hands behind her and her eyes open and empty of storm. Mud marked her cheek like a fingerprint. She did not look at Jonah. She looked past us at the lake as if there was a shape out there she could still call to her. The morning arrived all at once. Light took the edge off the trees and the house settled a fraction lower on its foundation. Somewhere a cow made a sound that belonged to a different scene. A breeze ran across the lake and dented it and then smoothed it flat again. The ambulance door stood open and breathed heat. A paramedic clicked a cuff around Jonah's arm and watched a small gauge steady itself. Antiseptic hung in the air. The lights painted the gravel a sickly white and made the barn look like paper. "I am fine," Jonah said, a little too loud, which meant he was not. He held my sleeve with the hand that did not have a cuff on it. The paramedic nodded and gave him a sticker with a cartoon fox. "You did a brave thing," she said. "Sit tight 1 more minute." Earl sat on the bumper with a space blanket around his shoulders and a butterfly bandage across his cut. The blanket crackled when he breathed. His eyes were on Jonah. If he blinked, he did it when no one was watching. The detective with the lined face stood a few steps away. He did not step into our light. Mud creased his pant leg and dried there. When he spoke, it came out quiet and round. "She is under arrest," he said. "Weapons kidnapping conspiracy. The man we picked up has started to cooperate." He left the rest unsaid. He looked at Jonah and then at me. "Hospital first," he said. "We will need statements, but not now." He turned to go. I stopped him without touching him. "I want a minute," I said. He understood. He told a uniform to stay with me and walked toward the patrol car where Vanessa sat. They let me stand outside the open door with a deputy at my elbow. The interior lights made everything inside look flat like a stage set. Vanessa's hands were bound. Her cheek had a smear of dirt. She watched her own reflection in the window as if it might move separate from her. "Vanessa," I said. Her eyes slid to me and then away to the lake, which had gone slate gray now that the light had found it. "Why?" I said. The word was simple and heavy. It sat between us, and we both had to look at it. She tipped her head, and the cuffs made a small metallic sigh. "You would not understand." "Try me." She looked back. The anger was gone, and something dull had replaced it. Debt. Noise in my head. Everything pressed in, and there was no room. He said it could be clean. He said we would sleep through it. He said it would be a story no one would pull at. "Jonah is 7, I said. Her mouth shook once and then held. "I was not going to do it to him," she said, "at first." The deputy shifted his weight. Tires crackled on gravel somewhere behind me. The lake took a small breath and let it out. "You do not get to tell yourself that I said. I did not raise my voice. That is the one thing you do not get to keep." She held my face in her eyes for a count and then dropped it. The deputy touched the roof as a sign. The conversation was over. They closed the door. The car moved away without drama and took a corner and rolled down the dirt road until it was just taillight. At the hospital, the fluorescents hummed with the patience of a hive. Plastic chairs in rows, a vending machine that wanted dollar bills laid flat, a poster about hand washing. Jonah wore a paper bracelet and swung his legs. The swing made a quiet slap against the chair. He looked smaller under the light, not younger, just less in every direction. The night nurse had careful hands and a voice you could lean against. She checked the scrape on his knee and the brightness in his eyes. She asked him to squeeze her fingers and to follow a small penlight with his gaze. He did what she asked. He glanced at me after each request as if I might tell him if he had passed. Earl sat with a cup of hospital coffee and did not drink it. He had changed out of his blanket into a navy jacket that belonged to a volunteer. The jacket had a stitched name that was not his. He rubbed the edge of the cup with his thumb and made a track in the condensation that formed there. Somewhere in the building, a baby cried and then settled. A television in a corner showed a news loop with the sound off. A woman in a suit used her hands a lot. The captions lagged and did not match her mouth. The detective came back once with a clipboard and then left again when he saw Jonah's head on my shoulder. He nodded just once. He understood about timing. By the time the sky turned thin and pale, the waiting room had emptied. Rain ticked on the glass and printed small coins across it. The nurse brought a blanket the color of oatmeal and tucked it over Jonah's legs. He slept in tight short stitches and then longer ones, and then his body remembered something and woke him. His breath jumped. He blinked and found me and settled again. We left when the discharge papers had our names in the right places. Outside, the air had washed itself. It smelled like wet metal and fur. Earl's sister had a bungalow a few blocks from the hospital, a square little place with a porch and a wind chime that made a thin music when the door opened. Inside, the living room had a yellow lamp and a rug with a faded border. On the mantel, a black and white photograph of the Tacoma Narrows Bridge before it fell leaned against the wall. A bowl of fruit sat on the table, apples with their stems still attached. The house had a heart that beat slow and strong. Jonah went straight to the window and pressed his forehead to the glass. His breath fogged it and left a cloud. He used his finger to draw a small key and then wiped it away with the heel of his hand. He turned and put both arms around my waist without speaking. "I need to change the locks," I said to Earl. He nodded as if I had said, "Pass the salt." He went out to his truck and came back with a metal case. It opened with a click. The tray inside held cylinders and plates and a little brass brush. His hands moved with an old rhythm. He set the case on a towel and laid out the parts in a line. "I will take the back," he said. "You take the front." We worked without talk. Screws into a dish, latch out, faceplate in my palm smooth with wear, new cylinder, new key teeth like a small mountain range. The screwdriver bit and turned. The house made a sound when it accepted the change, something soft and low you would not notice if you were not listening for it. Jonah watched from the rug with a blanket around his shoulders. He held a mug of cocoa and blew across the top. Steam lifted in a veil. He touched the heavy keys with one finger and the ring chimed. I reached into my coat and took out the small brass key that had lived in my pocket for years. My father had given it to me when I was Jonah's age. He had filed the teeth himself and polished the head with a cloth that smelled like metal and oil. The stem had a notch near the bow where a vice had once gripped it too tight. I sat on the floor and put the key in Jonah's palm. The brass looked too bright against his skin. "For your pocket," I said. "It does not open anything here. It just feels right when you hold it." He looked at it as if it might ask him a question. He closed his hand. "It is cold," he said. "It will warm," I said. Earl stepped in from the back door and shook rain from his jacket. "All set," he said. He showed me the old lock body in his hand like a pulled tooth. He dropped it into the case and snapped the lid. We ate toast at the table with the bowl of fruit. Butter left glisten on the bread. Jonah ate with both hands. Crumbs stuck to his lip. A little of the color had come back to his face. He put the key in his hoodie pocket and patted the outside to make sure it stayed. Later, after Earl left the house, went quiet around us. A clock in the hall clicked once every second. Cars passed on the street with a sound like a slow river. Jonah lay down on the couch and stared at the ceiling. The plaster had a hairline crack that wandered toward the corner like a line on a palm. "I am tired," he said. "Sleep," I said. He closed his eyes. His lashes made small shadows. His breathing found an even lane. I sat in the chair by the window and watched the glass breathe with us. The wind chime tinked. A neighbor's dog barked twice and then thought better of it. He woke once with his heart beating too fast and his mouth open for air. I put my hand on his chest and felt the thump settle under my palm. He did not speak. He put his hand over mine and held it there. In the afternoon, the therapist had a room 2 blocks away. We went because the nurse wrote the address on a small card and put it in my pocket herself. The room had a shelf of plastic animals in a line and a basket of blocks. The woman who met us wore soft shoes and had a laugh that did not show her teeth. She spoke to Jonah with her head at his level. He built a small wall between them with the blocks. She waited until he left a gap and then spoke through it. He said 2 things and then 3, and then he was quiet. We walked back in a light that had the color of milk in it. The air was clear enough to make the mountain look impossibly close. At the corner, a boy on a bike went past with his jacket flapping like a flag. A woman pulled basil from a pot on her porch, and the smell drifted. Evening settled in the bungalow the way a blanket settles over knees. I checked the windows. I turned the deadbolts and felt each one slide and seat. I hung my coat on the back of a chair and set the new keys in a bowl by the door. They made a clean sound when they landed. Jonah stood at the window again. He pressed his palm to the glass, and fog bloomed under it. He traced a circle and let it fade. He turned, put his hand in his pocket like a man much older than he was, and touched the small brass key to make sure it had not left him by mistake. When I stepped onto the porch to breathe the night air, the wind chime made a thin, careful song. The street lamp caught the damp on the rail and made it look like it had been dusted with sugar. Far off, a train called and drew its sound across the dark. I went back inside. The house took me in at the door. The new lock turned under my hand. The bolt slid. The knob settled in my palm as if it had been made to fit there. The key met the faceplate and went in. It turned. The mechanism spoke in a small, certain voice. Click. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.